Love and desperation. The bank worker who took $6.60 million for her family. The Tanaka family's tea shop was nestled in a quiet corner of Yokohama, where the gentle hum of the waves could be heard in the early mornings. Kaori often sat by the window, watching her father, Haruto, prepare the shop for the day. He would meticulously arrange the tea tins on the shelves, his hands steady and deliberate. "Kaori," Haruto called one morning, his voice warm yet firm. "Come help me with these deliveries. You'll need to learn how to handle customers someday." Kaori, barely 8 years old, hopped off her chair and ran to her father's side. "Yes, Papa, I'll carry the lighter box," she said with a giggle, her small hands gripping the wooden crate filled with tea packets. "You'll carry the lighter box for now," Haruto replied with a chuckle. "But one day, you'll be running this shop better than I ever could." Her mother, Aiko, chimed in from behind the counter, her hands deftly folding tea leaves into delicate packets. "She'll be running much more than a tea shop, Haruto. This girl has her sights set higher." Kaori grinned. "I want to go to a big university and learn about the world. Maybe I'll even own a bank someday." "Ah, a bank owner," Haruto teased, ruffling her hair. "Just don't forget us when you're busy counting money in Tokyo." Evenings in the Tanaka household were filled with warmth despite their modest means. After dinner, Aiko would pull out a battered copy of Tales of Genji and read to her children. The room would fall silent as her soothing voice painted pictures of ancient Japan. "Kaori," her eldest brother Kenji whispered one evening, "how do you always get such good grades? I've seen your math book. It looks like a puzzle for geniuses." "It's not that hard if you focus," Kaori replied, her tone confident. "You just have to break it into smaller pieces like solving a mystery." Sora, her younger brother, chimed in. "Then teach me. I don't get it at all. Numbers are boring." "They're not boring. They're like clues," Kaori said, pulling out her notebook. "See, this equation? It's like a treasure map. Solve it, and you find the treasure." Their laughter filled the room, a brief reprieve from the financial struggles their parents tried to shield them from. Years later, Kaori's hard work paid off when she received a full scholarship to the University of Tokyo to study in the prestigious Faculty of Economics. The day the acceptance letter arrived was filled with both joy and bittersweet goodbyes. "Kaori," Aiko said, holding back tears, "you've made us so proud, but Tokyo is far, and you'll have to take care of yourself." "I'll be fine, Mama," Kaori reassured her, though her voice wavered slightly. "And I'll come back as soon as I can." Haruto placed a hand on her shoulder. "Study hard, Kaori. This is your chance to build the future you've always dreamed of." Before she boarded the train to Tokyo, Kenji handed her a small wrapped package. "For good luck," he said. Inside was a charm shaped like a tea leaf, a reminder of home. "Thank you, Kenji," Kaori whispered, her eyes glistening. She looked back at her family one last time before stepping onto the train, her heart heavy, yet filled with determination. At the University of Tokyo's Faculty of Economics, Kaori threw herself into her studies with an unparalleled drive. The curriculum was rigorous, with lectures on microeconomics, financial systems, and market theory challenging even the brightest students. Yet Kaori thrived, often calling home late at night to share her experiences. "Mama, the campus is so big, and the library, it's like a treasure trove of knowledge," she said during one call, her voice filled with excitement. "And how are your classes, Kaori?" Aiko asked, her voice steady but tinged with worry. "Are you managing well?" "They're tough, but I'm tougher," Kaori said with a small laugh. "I've even started helping some of my classmates with economics. They say I explain it better than the professors." "That's my girl," Haruto's voice chimed in over the phone. "Remember, no matter how high you climb, keep your feet on the ground." "I will, Papa," Kaori promised, though she couldn't help but dream of the heights she would one day reach. The university had opened her eyes to possibilities she had never imagined, and Kaori was determined to seize every opportunity it presented. After graduating at the top of her class, Kaori's career took off when she secured a position at Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, MUFG, Japan's largest bank. Her first day at the bank was a mix of excitement and nervous energy as she stepped into the grand lobby, her polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Tanaka-san, welcome to MOFG," said her supervisor, Ito-san, extending a hand. He was a tall, composed man with a commanding presence. "We've heard great things about you from your professors." "Thank you, Ito-san," Kaori replied, bowing slightly. "It's an honor to join the team. I'll do my best to meet expectations." Ito gestured toward the rows of offices and bustling desks. "You'll be starting in the safe deposit division. It's one of the most trusted departments in the bank. Precision and discretion are key. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir," Kaori said firmly, though her heart raced. "I'm ready for the challenge." Over the months, Kaori proved herself to be a rising star. She quickly adapted to the complexities of managing high-value client accounts and overseeing the secure operations of the vaults. Her meticulous nature earned her the respect of her colleagues. "Kaori, how do you always keep everything so organized?" asked Nakamura, a fellow analyst, as they worked late one evening. Kaori smiled, glancing at the rows of files she had neatly arranged. "I double-check everything. It's better to spend an extra minute now than lose hours fixing a mistake later." "Spoken like a true perfectionist," Nakamura said with a chuckle. "But seriously, you're making the rest of us look bad." One afternoon, Ito stopped by her desk holding a stack of documents. "Tanaka-san, excellent work on the audit last week. The executives were impressed with your attention to detail." "Thank you, Ito-san," Kaori replied, feeling a swell of pride. "It's a team effort, but I'm glad it met their expectations." By her early 30s, Kaori's diligence and reliability had earned her significant responsibilities. She was trusted to oversee client accounts and manage the bank's high-security vaults, a role that required unwavering precision and integrity. During a team meeting, Ito addressed the group with a rare smile. "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Tanaka-san. Her recent work has set a new standard for this department. Keep it up, Tanaka-san." Kaori bowed her head slightly, her cheeks flushing. "Thank you, Ito-san. I'll continue to give it my all." Her colleagues clapped lightly, some whispering to each other. "She's unstoppable," Nakamura muttered to another co-worker. "We'll be reporting to her in no time." Kaori's rise through the ranks didn't go unnoticed back home. Her parents beamed with pride every time she called to share a new milestone. "Kaori, you've worked so hard for this," Aiko said during one phone call. "Your father and I couldn't be prouder." "Thank you, Mama," Kaori replied softly. "But there's still so much more I want to achieve. This is just the beginning." Kaori sat in her Tokyo apartment, her phone pressed to her ear as her mother's voice came through, soft yet laced with worry. "Kaori," Aiko began, "the tea shop isn't doing as well as it used to. Fewer people come by these days." Kaori frowned, gripping the phone tighter. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mama? How bad is it?" "It's nothing we can't manage," Aiko replied quickly. "Your father and I are handling it." "Mama, handling it how?" Kaori asked, her voice firm. "Are you taking loans again?" There was a pause before Aiko sighed. "Just a little to keep things going. We didn't want to bother you." Kaori leaned back, her chest tightening. "Mama, you should have told me. I can help. I'll send more money this month." "Kaori, you already send us so much," Aiko said gently. "You need to take care of yourself, too." "I'll be fine," Kaori insisted. "You and Papa don't need to worry. The shop is part of our family. It's worth supporting." Kaori hesitated before speaking. "My parents' shop is struggling, and my brother's treatments. They're all relying on me, Nakamura. No matter how much I send, it's never enough." "That's tough," Nakamura said, frowning. "But you're doing everything you can, right?" Kaori shook her head. "It doesn't feel like enough. I make a good salary, but between living in Tokyo and helping my family, there's nothing left. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." "You've always been the strong one," Nakamura said thoughtfully. "If anyone can figure this out, it's you." Kaori managed a weak smile, but his words did little to ease the weight on her shoulders. As she stared into her glass, she couldn't help but wonder how she would find a way to keep everything from falling apart. In early 2020, Kaori's role at MUFG presented an unexpected opportunity. While conducting routine checks on safe deposit boxes, she discovered that several high-value clients had left their boxes untouched for years. Among these dormant accounts, she identified cash and valuables that could easily go unnoticed if removed. Kaori sat alone in the break room, her tea growing cold on the table before her. The low hum of the bank's air conditioning filled the silence, but her thoughts were far louder. "This isn't about greed," she told herself. "I don't want luxury. I don't want more than I need. I just need to help them." Her mind raced through every sacrifice her parents had made, every sleepless night she'd spent worrying about her brother's treatments. What else can I do? She closed her eyes and saw her father's weathered hands, trembling as he placed yet another payment slip on their crowded kitchen table. They won't ask me for help because they're too proud. But I know they're struggling. Her thoughts shifted to Sora, his tired smile as he downplayed his illness. "Don't worry about me, Kaori-ni," he had said, but his frailty was impossible to ignore. "I can't let him suffer because we can't afford the best care." Her fingers tightened around her teacup. But the money, it's just sitting there. These accounts have been dormant for years. No one will notice if I take a little, just enough to cover what we need. Her stomach churned. Is this really the answer? The voice in her head fought back. "You've done everything by the book, and where has it gotten you? You're drowning. They're drowning. And you have the power to save them." She thought about the vault. Row after row of safe deposit boxes, some untouched for decades. They trust me with access because they think I'm reliable. And I am. I'll be careful. I won't take too much. Just enough to get us through this. She tried to reassure herself, but a heavy weight pressed against her chest. What if they find out? What if I lose everything I've worked for? Her mind spiraled with fear, but another part of her argued back. But what if you don't act? What if Sora gets worse? What if the shop closes? You've come so far, Kaori. You can't let it all fall apart now. She took a shaky breath, her tea now completely cold. "It's not greed," she repeated to herself. "It's survival. This is the only way to regain control, to protect them. They need me." Kaori stood, her hands trembling but her resolve hardening. "I'll do this, just once, and I'll fix everything. I'll put it all back one day." As she walked back to her desk, her reflection in the glass doors seemed to stare back at her. A young woman teetering on the edge of an irreversible decision. By March 2020, Kaori had resolved to take a step that would change her life forever. The rain outside the bank's windows fell steadily, a rhythmic backdrop to the tension mounting within her. She had stayed late as she often did, her reputation for diligence ensuring no one questioned her presence. The silence of the empty office amplified the pounding of her heart as she approached the vault. As Kaori keyed in her access code, her mind raced with doubts. "What am I doing?" she thought, her hand trembling slightly. "This isn't who I am. I've spent years building trust, working hard, and now I'm about to throw it all away?" She hesitated, her finger hovering over the final button. But then she saw in her mind's eye her parents' struggling tea shop, the overdue bills piling up on their counter, her brother's pale face in the hospital bed. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't for me," she reminded herself. "It's for them. Just this once. I can fix this." The vault door unlocked with a quiet beep, and she stepped inside, the cool air brushing against her skin. Rows of safe deposit boxes stretched before her, each holding secrets and treasures entrusted to the bank. Kaori had already selected her target, a long, dormant account belonging to a foreign client who hadn't accessed it in over a decade. The client's silence had made the box an easy choice, but the thought of what she was about to do sent a wave of nausea through her. With the master key in hand, she approached the box, her steps slow and deliberate. What if I get caught? What if someone notices? The thought made her chest tighten, but she forced herself to push it aside. No one will notice. It's been untouched for years. Just take a little, enough to make things right. The key slid into the lock with a smoothness that felt almost too easy, as though the universe itself was complicit in her plan. When the box opened, Kaori froze. Inside were bundles of yen, neatly stacked and untouched. She stared at them, her breath caught in her throat. The sight was overwhelming, a strange mix of temptation and fear. That's 10 million yen, she thought, her mind calculating the immediate impact it could have. It could pay for Sora's next round of treatments. It could help my parents catch up on their debts. It could fix everything. Her hand hovered over the bundles. What if I just shut the box and walk away? The thought flickered, but then the memory of her father's voice surfaced. Kaori, we'll manage. Don't worry about us. He had said that so many times, even as his hands shook while holding another overdue notice. I can't walk away, she realized. They need me. She reached in, her fingers brushing against the crisp edges of the bills. Quickly, she grabbed a portion. Not all of it, just enough to cover what they needed. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, as she resealed the box and returned the master key. Her hands trembled as she double-checked her work, ensuring everything looked untouched. Back at her desk, Kaori logged into the system to complete the final step. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she altered the logs, marking the box as undergoing routine maintenance. The excuse was mundane, unremarkable, perfectly crafted to avoid suspicion. As she stepped out into the rainy night, her bag heavier with the stolen cash, Kaori's thoughts swirled. This is it, she told herself. Just once, just enough to fix things. And then I'll stop. But deep inside, a small voice whispered what she refused to admit. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Kaori moved with mechanical precision, as though her body was on autopilot. She arrived at a discreet ATM far from her usual route, and deposited the stolen money into a secret account she had opened weeks earlier. As the bills disappeared into the machine, her heart pounded in her chest. This is for them, she told herself, gripping the receipt tightly. For Sora's medical bills, for the shop. They'll never know where it came from, but it will keep them safe. Later that day, she used the funds to pay off some of her brother's mounting medical expenses and settle overdue payments for her parents' shop. When her mother called to thank her, her voice brimming with gratitude, Kaori felt a fleeting sense of relief. Kaori, this is too much, Aiko said, her voice trembling. You've already done so much for us. How are you managing? Kaori forced a smile she didn't feel, even though her mother couldn't see it. Don't worry, Mama. I've had some good bonuses at work. It's nothing I can't handle. As she hung up, the guilt began to creep in again. Bonuses, she thought bitterly. If only they knew. But as she walked back to her apartment, she pushed the thought aside. I've done what I had to. Now they'll be okay, and that's all that matters. Despite her initial resolve to stop, Carrie quickly found the relief she felt from addressing her family's financial burdens was fleeting. It wasn't long before new expenses began to surface. Sora's treatments required additional funds, and the debts she had accrued from her failed investments still loomed, relentless and unforgiving. She sat alone in her apartment one evening, staring at the growing list of unpaid bills. I thought this would fix things, she thought, running her hands through her hair. Why does it feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough? She tried to resist the temptation, but the thought of the untouched vault lingered in her mind, insistent and unyielding. Just one more time, she told herself. I'll plan it better. Take only what I need, nothing more. The next theft came more easily. Kaori spent hours meticulously researching dormant accounts, scrolling through the bank's internal logs late at night. This one hasn't been touched in 15 years, she noted, highlighting a client's box in her encrypted file. Perfect. She told herself she wasn't stealing. She was borrowing. Borrowing from accounts that no one cared about, accounts that were practically forgotten. When the night came, Kaori moved with precision. The vault no longer felt as ominous as it had before. Instead, it felt almost familiar. She knew which cameras to avoid, which logs to alter. It's all routine, she thought as she opened the next box, revealing another stack of neatly bundled yen. Her hands were steadier this time. As she pocketed the cash, she whispered under her breath, This is for them, for the bills, for Sora. Back at her desk, she carefully manipulated the logs. The box was marked as checked for routine maintenance, just like the others. Kaori leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Perfect. No one will notice a thing. With each theft, Kaori's actions became more calculated. She set up an encrypted file on her personal laptop, detailing every withdrawal. Account 1342, 10 million yen. Account 1687, 15 million yen. The notes were precise, methodical. She tracked what she had taken and where it had gone, justifying every entry with reasons that soothed her growing guilt. They'd never use it anyway, she reasoned one evening as she updated her file. And when I get back on my feet, I'll repay every yen. Kaori also refined her methods for covering her tracks. She manipulated the bank's systems to ensure her after-hours access appeared legitimate. If anyone checked, they'd see a record of standard maintenance or routine audits. No physical evidence, she reminded herself every time she left the vault. Nothing to point to me. Her double life soon became a delicate balancing act. By day, she was the trusted employee, diligent and reliable, admired by her colleagues. By night, she was someone else entirely, a thief driven by desperation and necessity. "Kaori, how do you do it?" Nakamura asked her one afternoon at work. "You're always so calm, even under pressure." Kaori forced a smile. "It's just about staying organized," she replied. But inside, she felt the weight of her secret threatening to crush her. As the months passed, her guilt began to dull, buried beneath the perceived necessity of her actions. Each theft felt less like a crime and more like a survival tactic. She grew bolder, her steps more confident. The thrill of pulling off another theft without detection became almost intoxicating. One night, as she locked the vault behind her, she paused and looked back. For the first time, she allowed herself a fleeting thought. "I'm getting good at this." The realization both frightened and emboldened her. Kaori knew she was walking a dangerous line, but the weight of her family's needs kept her moving forward. As long as no one finds out, she thought, I can keep everything together. But deep down, she knew. Every step she took brought her closer to a point of no return. Kaori's thefts, once hesitant and sporadic, began to follow a steady rhythm as her confidence grew. By mid-2021, what had started as an act of desperation had transformed into a routine. Every few weeks, she would comb through dormant account records, identifying the next target, a forgotten box filled with wealth its owner had long neglected. Her mind was sharp, her choices deliberate. Boxes with smaller balances were passed over in favor of those holding sums large enough to make the risk worthwhile, but small enough not to raise suspicion if discovered. With each theft, Kaori refined her methods further. She varied the amounts she took, sometimes 10 million yen, sometimes as much as 25 million. She kept meticulous notes, encrypted and hidden in her personal files, tracking every withdrawal down to the last yen. Every move was calculated. The fewer mistakes, the longer she could maintain this delicate charade. Her financial life began to shift in ways she hadn't dared to imagine before. The anxiety that had consumed her for years began to ease, replaced by a sense of control she hadn't felt in a long time. She moved out of her cramped Tokyo apartment and into a bright, spacious home in a quiet neighborhood. It was modest enough not to draw attention, but for Kaori, it was a sanctuary, a place where she could escape the weight of her double life, if only for a moment. Her family's fortunes changed as well. The steady influx of money brought stability and hope. The tea shop that had struggled for years underwent renovations, transforming into a modern space that drew new customers daily. Her parents beamed with pride, often telling friends how Kaori's success in Tokyo had become the lifeline that kept their business alive. "Mama, you should upgrade the tea display shelves," Kaori suggested during a phone call. "It'll make the shop look more inviting." "That's a wonderful idea, Kaori," Aiko replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've done so much for us already. We don't know how to thank you." Sora's health improved dramatically. With access to the best care, his treatments became more effective and his energy returned. "Kaori-ni, you're amazing," he said during a video call, his smile brighter than it had been in years. "I don't know how you do it all." Kaori smiled back, masking the guilt bubbling beneath her composure. "It's nothing, Sora. I just want to make sure you're okay." While her family flourished, Kaori began to indulge in dreams she had long set aside. She enrolled in cooking classes, reveling in the joy of learning something new, and took quiet weekend trips to scenic spots outside Tokyo. These small luxuries gave her a sense of balance, a way to remind herself why she was doing this. But even as her confidence grew with every successful theft, Kaori never allowed herself to grow careless. She avoided splurging on extravagant items, always mindful of maintaining an air of modesty. Her colleagues often praised her dedication at work, completely unaware of the secret life she led. "Tanaka-san," Nakamura said one day, "how do you manage to stay so grounded with everything you've achieved?" Kaori shrugged, offering a practiced smile. "I just focus on what matters." In her mind, Kaori still believed she could maintain this dual existence indefinitely. As long as she planned each step carefully and left no trace, she told herself, she could keep helping her family without consequence. But deep within, a nagging voice warned her that even the most meticulous plans couldn't account for everything, and that the balance she'd so carefully crafted might one day tip. Kaori's life continued to balance precariously between her day job and her secret operations. By early 2024, her system had become second nature. She would research, select, withdraw, and conceal with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering her craft. Her encrypted files grew longer, detailing each box she had accessed and each sum she had taken. She had convinced herself that she was untouchable, as long as she remained careful. But cracks began to form. It started with a routine security audit at the bank, a process that Kaori had long been able to navigate undetected. This time, however, a junior IT specialist flagged a discrepancy in the access logs. "Ito-san," the specialist said during a departmental meeting, "I noticed a pattern. Some safe deposit boxes marked for maintenance haven't actually been accessed for years by their owners." The room grew silent as Ito, Kaori's supervisor, frowned and adjusted his glasses. "You're certain?" "Yes," the specialist confirmed. "The logs show after-hours access for maintenance checks, but there's no follow-up or owner confirmation. It's unusual." Kaori kept her expression calm, even as her pulse quickened. She knew this moment would come eventually. Anomalies like these couldn't stay hidden forever. She told herself to remain steady. "You've planned for this. Just act normal." That evening, Kaori sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her encrypted files. What went wrong, she thought, scanning her notes and cross-referencing them with the bank system. I've covered every step. There shouldn't be any traceable pattern. But the truth was undeniable. Over the years, her operations had become more frequent, and with frequency came risk. She had overlooked small details in her growing confidence, logs altered too often, maintenance records that overlapped inconsistently. "It's fine," she tried to reassure herself. "I can explain this. I've been in this role for years. They trust me." The next day, Ito called Kaori into his office. His tone was professional but edged with curiosity. "Tanaka-san," he began, gesturing for her to sit. "A question came up during the recent audit. Some of the access logs for the vault show unusual activity. Since you've been responsible for maintenance checks, I thought you might be able to clarify." Kaori smiled politely, her years of practice masking the turmoil inside. "Of course, Ito-san. What seems to be the issue?" He slid a printed log across the desk. "These entries show after-hours maintenance on several safe deposit boxes. However, our records don't indicate any corresponding client activity. It's probably nothing, but we need to document everything for compliance." Kaori leaned forward, glancing at the log. "Stay calm," she told herself. "They don't know anything yet." I remember these," she said smoothly. "Some of those boxes were flagged as overdue for routine checks. I handled them personally to ensure we stayed compliant. If I missed logging a follow-up, that's my oversight. I can correct it." Ito nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. "Please do. And for now, let's hold off on any further after-hours work until this is resolved." As Kaori left the office, the weight of her dual life began to press down harder than ever. That evening, she sat in her apartment staring at her files. This is it, she thought. I need to stop. I've pushed this too far. But it wasn't that simple. The money she had funneled into offshore accounts was still there, untouched, but she couldn't return it without raising suspicion. Maybe I can buy some time, make it look like nothing's wrong. A week later, the investigation deepened. The junior IT specialist uncovered more discrepancies, altered logs, inconsistent timestamps, and maintenance records that didn't align with bank protocols. This time, the findings were escalated to senior management. Cowrie noticed the shift almost immediately. Colleagues who once greeted her warmly now seemed guarded. Conversations paused when she entered the room, and then the final blow came, an official summons to a meeting with the internal audit team. She spent the night before the meeting staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "You've prepared for this," she told herself. "You've always been able to stay ahead. Just explain everything like you always do." But deep down, Cowrie knew. The carefully constructed balance she had maintained for years was beginning to collapse, and there might be no way to stop it. In the sterile meeting room, Cowrie sat across from Ito and the legal representatives. The air was thick with tension. A folder sat on the table, its contents hidden but foreboding. "Tanaka-san," Ito began, his tone measured. "The bank has completed its preliminary investigation. The findings raise serious concerns about your activities involving the vault." Cowrie's heart pounded, but she held her composure. "Concerns? I'm not sure I understand." One of the legal representatives opened the folder, pulling out printed logs, financial records, and security footage stills. "We have evidence showing repeated unauthorized access to dormant accounts and subsequent alterations to maintenance logs. Additionally, our records indicate discrepancies in the amounts reported during audits." Cowrie's mind raced. They've pieced it together. The logs, the patterns, they have everything. She forced herself to speak. "There must be a mistake. I've always followed the bank's protocols." Ito's expression hardened. "The evidence is clear, Tanaka-san. We've also traced significant sums of money to accounts connected to false identities. These transfers coincide with the dates of the vault accesses." Cowrie's breath hitched. "The offshore accounts. How did they trace them? I thought they were secure." "Given the severity of these findings," the legal representative continued, "the bank has no choice but to escalate this matter to law enforcement." Cowrie left the room in a daze, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She returned to her apartment that night, sitting in silence as the weight of her actions finally bore down on her. For years, she had convinced herself she could maintain control, that her actions were justified. But now, the reality of what she had done was inescapable. The police arrived the next morning. Cowrie opened the door, her face pale but composed. She didn't resist as they escorted her out, her neighbors watching in shocked silence. As she was placed into the back of the police car, her thoughts drifted to her family, her parents, her brother. "I wanted to protect them," she thought. "I never wanted it to end like this." The headlines the next day read, "MUFG employee arrested in multi-million yen theft scandal." Cowrie Tanaka's thefts, once a closely guarded secret, unraveled rapidly after the bank's investigation exposed her actions. By the time MUFG Bank concluded its audit in late 2024, the full scale of her crimes became clear. Cowrie had stolen over 1 yen billion, approximately $6.60 million, over a span of 4 years. Her thefts impacted around 60 customers, all of whom had entrusted their valuables to safe deposit boxes in 2 of MUFG's Tokyo branches. The investigators uncovered a meticulous system Cowrie had used to exploit her access. She relied on spare keys to gain entry into the safe deposit boxes of long-dormant accounts. Cowrie's thorough knowledge of the bank's protocols allowed her to mask her tracks for years, manipulating access logs and disguising her actions as routine maintenance. "We were shocked at the level of detail involved," one investigator later stated during a press briefing. "She operated with a level of precision that made it difficult to detect until now." Cowrie admitted to the crimes during questioning, revealing that the money had been used primarily for personal investments, including speculative ventures that failed to yield the returns she had hoped for. A significant portion of the funds also went toward covering her family's medical expenses, debts, and other financial burdens. "I never intended for it to escalate this far," Kaori reportedly said during the investigation. "It began as a way to help my family, but it became something I couldn't stop." The revelations were a public relations disaster for MUFG Bank. At a press conference in December 2024, the bank's president, Junichi Hanzawa, offered a formal apology. "This breach of trust is unacceptable," Hanzawa stated, bowing deeply before the cameras. "We take full responsibility for failing to prevent this incident and are implementing measures to ensure it never happens again." Among the corrective actions announced, MUFG Bank committed to centralizing the management of spare keys at its head office by January 2025. The Financial Services Agency, FSA, also stepped in, demanding a comprehensive report on the thefts under Japan's banking laws. For Kaori, the consequences were immediate and severe. She was dismissed from her position in November 2024, but legal proceedings against her were still ongoing as of December. While Kaori cooperated with investigators, her fate rested in the hands of law enforcement and the judicial system. If convicted under Japan's banking and theft laws, Kaori faced the possibility of several years in prison, depending on the court's ruling. Legal experts speculated that the sheer amount of money stolen, along with the calculated nature of her crimes, would result in a harsh sentence. For the customers affected by Kaori's actions, the betrayal cut deeper than the missing yen. It wasn't just about the money or the heirlooms, it was the shattering of a fundamental trust. Safe deposit boxes symbolized security, a promise that their most precious belongings would be safeguarded behind the impenetrable walls of the bank. Kaori had violated that promise. "I don't understand how someone like her could do this," said one client whose jewelry collection had been stolen. "She had a good job, a stable life. Why would she need to steal from people like us?" Another customer, an elderly man who had stored war medals and letters from his late wife in one of the boxes, expressed his heartbreak. "These weren't just valuables. They were memories, things I can never replace, and she just took them as if they meant nothing." Despite the bank's pledge to compensate all affected clients, the emotional toll was harder to quantify. Customers spoke of sleepless nights, wondering if they would ever truly recover what had been lost. The scandal sparked a wave of distrust in the banking industry, with many questioning whether any institution could be trusted to safeguard their possessions. Meanwhile, public opinion on Kaori herself was sharply divided. On one hand, many saw her as a calculating criminal who had taken advantage of her position for personal gain. "She knew exactly what she was doing," one commentator wrote on social media. "You don't accidentally steal over 1 billion yen." Others, however, viewed her story through a more sympathetic lens. The details of her family's struggles, her brother's medical expenses, and the crushing financial pressures she faced struck a chord with some. "What she did was wrong," a popular blog post stated. "But let's not pretend we don't live in a society where people are pushed to the brink by circumstances beyond their control. She's a product of that pressure." Some even romanticized her actions, comparing her to modern-day Robin Hood figures. "She wasn't stealing for yachts or private jets," one tweet read. "She was trying to save her family. There's a tragedy to her story that makes it hard to completely condemn her." Kaori herself remained silent in the weeks following her arrest, speaking only during interrogations. But those close to the investigation revealed glimpses of her mental state. Sitting alone in the detention room, Kaori was reportedly introspective and remorseful. "I never thought it would go this far," she told one investigator, her voice trembling. "I thought I could fix everything, my family, their debts, their future. But instead I've destroyed everything. I've destroyed myself." The public fascination with Kaori's story only grew as details of her life surfaced. Once celebrated as a model employee and devoted daughter, she became the center of media scrutiny. Headlines dissected her double life, while talk shows debated whether she was a victim of circumstance or a master manipulator. One investigative journalist described her as a paradox, someone who seemed to live a life of meticulous order and integrity, yet harbored a secret that unraveled it all. For her family, the fallout was equally devastating. Her parents, who had unknowingly benefited from the stolen money, faced their own guilt and shame. "We never asked for this," her mother reportedly told a friend. "If we had known, I just wish she had come to us. We could have found another way." In the end, Kaori's story became a reflection of society's broader struggles with trust, desperation, and the thin line between right and wrong. For some, she was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the consequences of crossing ethical boundaries. For others, she was a tragic figure, her actions born from a flawed but genuine desire to protect those she loved. The legacy of her actions left an indelible mark not just on the bank, but on every person whose life her choices had touched. Even as the legal proceedings loomed, the broader questions remained. Could the damage ever truly be undone? And what drove a woman like Kaori, who seemed to have it all, to risk everything?